welcome to the Popcorn Junkies. We are reviewing presents. Not as in Christmas presents, which puts me in mind of a joke. How does Darth Vader know what Luke Skywalker's getting for Christmas?
I felt your presence.
The presence of something. Something is present, and thus it has presents. This is the new film by Steven Soderbergh. Steven Soderbergh, what a curious director. He's directed so many odd, far-reaching, far-ranging specimens of moviness, from Sex, Lies and Videotape, which gave me a frisson of excitement back in the 80s. When was that out? 1989. I was a red-blooded 18-year-old when that came out. Erin Brockovich with Julia Roberts, Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. More recently, he had that movie out, which I think we may have reviewed on the channel, Unsane, with Claire Foy, where she was shot on an iPhone 10 and she's admitted to a kind of psychiatric institute. Magic Mike. I mean, he was responsible for Magic Mike. I mean, what? It doesn't make sense when you start to unpack some of the movies that he's made. So this is Presents. I suppose the best way to describe this is it's a sort of, well, it's a supernatural horror. It's a supernatural, I'd say it's more a supernatural thriller than horror. There's a few jump scares. The whole film is threaded through with a sense of unease and a presence. I don't wish to keep sort of pushing on the word, but I mean, there's a good reason it's called Presence. And you feel the presence of the supernatural ghost. This put me in mind of a movie that was released some years ago, which I think starred Casey Affleck, is it? Or as a voice, called A Ghost Story, which was really about a fixed house or a fixed place. A little bit like the recent Robert Zemeckis film called Here, I think it is. God, I'm going off on a tangent here. But A Ghost Story was essentially about a ghost that was left in a property or died on this piece of land, and the ghost sees the arrival and departure of so many different families and people through this house, and the ghost is forever there. It was quite effective. It was quite mesmeric. It was quite sort of thought-provoking and meditative almost, and mindful. It wasn't creepy. It was quite maudlin and quite sad. This film has a similar vibe to it. If you've seen the trailer, it's very much a sort of almost 0.5 lens on an iPhone. It's shot by Steven Soderbergh, the director. It looks like it could have been shot on a very sort of, obviously beefed up and kind of modified iPhone camera. But it's shot in extraordinary widescreen, and it's all shot from the point of view of a ghost or a presence of some form within a suburban house. And into this house moves a family, shown the house, interestingly, by Julia Fox, no less. Yes, she of Uncut Gems, she of Almost Marrying Kanye. She's the realtor. She introduces them to the house and they move in, and the family moves in. One of the mum is played by Lucy Liu. You remember Lucy Liu, wasn't she one of Charlie's Angels? And so the family moves in, but the family that's moving in, it has a shadow of sadness over it. The young girl in the family, Chloe, who's a teenage girl, she has the dark shadow of depression or teenage angst hanging over her. And there's a reason for that, because her best friend, or a friend of hers called Nadia, interestingly, has died prior to the film happening. And her friend Nadia dying is just one of two girls, or teenage girls, who've died recently before the start of the film. So the film very much parks the idea in your mind that this family coming in is sort of, burdened, or certainly the daughter is burdened by the post-traumatic stress disorder, if you like, of losing a friend. There's also a son called Tyler, who's a jock. He's a bit of a jock, but he's also a bit of a jock who wants to be more popular than he is. The mum and dad, there's not really too much affection or kind of intimacy between them. Lucy Liu does a really good job of being the kind of business-orientated mum. She's always on her phone. It's Tyler, her son, is her favourite. The dad is much closer to the daughter, and the dad kind of relates to the daughter much more. But all of this story, we're given a portrait of them settling into this house, and it's all we see it all from the, you could say, restricted point of view of the camera. And the camera is relentlessly throughout this film the presence in the house, and so we see everything. And what I quite liked about this film, actually, from the beginning, it's very simple. It's a very simple device. It's a very simple concept. It doesn't indulge in any kind of, there are a few jumpy moments, but not massively. It's not, if you're a bit nervous, it's unsettling. And yet at the same time, although it's unsettling, it also speaks to, potentially, and I've heard it said by some mediums and people who can see ghosts or feel that they know ghosts, it's not an entirely unpleasant presence. So we have this presence, the presence is in the room, and it's very much the ghost, if you like, and the POV of the ghost is very much located in Chloe, the teenage girl's closet in her room. And so we see the day-to-day movements and evolution of this family settling into the house. The teenage boy and Chloe, Tyler and Chloe, they don't get on too well. There's a lot of argy-bargy between the two of them. She's a bit of a loner. She's kind of a bit isolated. She's not too popular. But we also discover that she's quite provocative. She's quite rebellious. She's up for a bit of hanky-panky with one of her brother Tyler's mates. We discover that Tyler, although he's a jock and although he's kind of wanting to be, he's so desperate for friendship. He's so desperate to belong that it's why he's kind of become part of this friendship group that introduces the boy played by Wes Mulholland, Ryan. Ryan, you don't like Ryan. Be warned, if you see this film, watch out for Ryan because he might have foppish, floppy curtains for hair, but my God, he's a deeply disturbed and troubling young man. So needless to say, what happens in this film is that we're put in the privileged position of knowing there's a ghost here and we're kind of viewing them. And what's clever about that is it creates a real sort of tension as you're watching it. You're thinking, oh, you feel voyeuristic. You feel like you're watching, and it does a very good job, this film, of making you feel like you're privy to some genuinely private moments, even though it's all fictional. You get the sense of disconnection between various members of the family. You get a sense of how this family dynamic is tired at the edges. There's a dysfunctionality, and yet ironically the dysfunctionality of this family is the kind of dysfunctionality you get in all families. Sibling rivalry, a real hostility actually between the teenage girl Chloe and her brother, a total disconnect between the husband and his wife. He's considering divorce. There's an unhappy, you could argue that this whole film very much ticks the box of poltergeists, doesn't it? The idea with a poltergeist is present when there's a sort of emotionally erratic teenager who's kind of coming of age and all that kind of stuff. Think Carrie and think Poltergeist and all that kind of stuff. So you've got that sense. But this ghost, the ghost in this film is very much already in the house. Now, due to a moment where Chloe's brother Tyler, him and his friends at school post a sort of inappropriate image of another girl at school in an act of bullying. And this is the point at which the presence, the ghost of the film, smashes up Tyler's bedroom, just hurls everything around. And so suddenly, as a family, it's pretty hard to ignore the fact that actually there's a presence here. And what they've done also before this kind of moment, this is a kind of turning point where the ghost makes the family know it's there in some way. The daughter Chloe has on a couple of occasions looked up and looked at the camera. And when that happens in this film, it's really clever, it's really neat, because you suddenly feel like, oh, I'm the presence. It does a very good job, this film. Lots of films use POV. Very few films actually use POV persistently and constantly throughout, and this film very much does that. Oh, and also the thing that I kind of diverted away from saying, the passage of time, it's almost like the opening and shutting of eyelids. Some scenes in the kind of building of the portrait of the family living in this house and the dynamic of them living together, some scenes can be just one shot following someone upstairs into the bathroom. When the door shuts, it fades to black. There's a real sense of hearing voices in the other room, hearing members of the family downstairs, a real sense of kind of time passing, and almost the presence it moves around the house, but even at times, even the presence kind of wants its own privacy. So it sort of almost escapes back up to Chloe's room and hides itself in the closet. So Tyler's room gets smashed up because Tyler's an absolute twat. He's posted inappropriate images of a girl at school. He's trying to do it to get in with the in crowd. He wants to be friends with Ryan. Don't forget Ryan with the blonde curtains. Ugh. After that, they call in a medium. So a medium comes in. And as she arrives, she looks directly into the camera. She's shocked. And, this sort of stuff shouldn't really work, because how many films have we seen where mediums come in and exorcists come in and they exorcise the house and all that kind of stuff? She comes in, she feels a lot, she gets exhausted by it. I love the fact that there was a kind of really quite sort of a functional description of the trials and tribulations of being a sort of jobbing medium, because at the point that this medium comes in and she feels the presence in this house, she senses there's something here, and she's like, whoa, she's exhausted by the passage. I don't know what happens to a medium. Does it pass through you, out of you, in you? Does it stay there? Whatever. She's spent. Well, her husband, who's with her, who's a bit of a gimp, if I'm honest, he sort of goes over to the father of the family and says, it takes it out of her, all this kind of mediuming stuff. And clearly what he's saying is, she has to take a couple of days off work. I mean, I've often wondered, does mediuming, if that's such a thing, do you get days off in lieu? I don't know. But anyway, so she's come around. So she confirms there's the presence of something. Really, it's not even a film that kind of works on the idea that there isn't a ghost there, because there's a ghost there. And that's quite clever. It's quite clever for a film to build this tension. And I'm not quite, you're never quite sure, what is the tension building to? Because we know there's a ghost. Well, the medium comes back one day and says to the dad, look, I think this thing, this presence, whatever's in your house, it's here for a reason. And I think it's got something to do with a locked, unopened window, or a window that doesn't open. And you're like, oh, fucking hell. Now, where this film becomes really interesting, and I thought quite shocking, and I wasn't expecting this element to it, and I've read some of the reviews, and none of the reviews really home in on this. And was it just me? Gabby, you've seen this film. Was it just me that found this bit deeply, deeply disturbing? Ryan, the boy with the blonde curtains, guy that was a friend of her brother's, he fancies Chloe, and he fancies having a bit of sex with Chloe. They do have sex. You see them having sex, and the ghost, the presence, hides in the cupboard and doesn't want to look. It actually sort of hides behind the slats of the cupboard. It's quite coy. It's quite shy. But at the same time, on one occasion where Chloe doesn't want to have sex with Ryan goes to put a drug to spike her drink. He's a date raper. He's nasty. And so he puts this drug or this substance in one of her drinks, and she doesn't want to have sex. And at this point, the presence comes in, rattles the table. Sounds a bit naff, rattles the table and the drink falls on the floor. So it saves her. If there was one thing about this film that didn't really kind of register or work for me, was when the presence decided to step in and rattle things. I mean, it quite literally rattled tables, and they use a visual device where it's sort of like an intense kind of, and the screen kind of goes like it's almost seismically and spiritually trying to alert people. And I think there's a lack of consistency as to when the presence tried to protect Chloe, principally, because you begin to realise that this presence is looking after Chloe. Anyway, through various machinations, the parents are going away on business. The dad's very unhappy. He's broken down on the phone. The family's falling apart. He said to Chloe, I believe there's something weird here. Well, what do mum and dad do at a moment when they believe their house is haunted? Oh, I know what. They go away and they leave the house to their children. Which means Ryan, the nasty fucking rascal, thinks, I know what I'll do. I'll head over, drug or spike Tyler's drink, the brother, so he passes out in the lounge, then goes upstairs, feigns feeling sad and traumatic. He's a proper pick-me boy, this Ryan. He's a nasty, manipulative pick-me boy. And then he spikes a drink again. And the bit that I didn't get here was the presence is watching this. We're watching this as the ghost. And whereas earlier it kind of jolted things up to try and stop it, on this occasion it didn't. And you are left thinking, well, why didn't it stop it here? Anyway, I mean, you could say splitting hairs, but it's kind of key. And suddenly the monster in the film and the horror in the film is Ryan. And why is this presence there? What was the medium saying? The presence is here for a reason. It's got a job to do, and it involves a window. Well, you're about to find out. But before we find out, there's a scene of essentially spiking and potentially date raping a young girl in this film, where he uses cellophane, this boy, Ryan. He keeps putting cellophane, once she's passed out on the bed, on her face, so that when she breathes in, she can't get air in, and she's struggling for breath, and then he pulls it off. I mean, I found the scene where Ryan, the boy, is essentially teasing with Chloe, with her life, threatening to suffocate her. And then he starts to say to her, I presume it's true, that he was responsible for the death of Nadia, and he was responsible for the death of the other girl. And that actually this nasty fucking psychopathic Aryan Brotherhood, curtains kind of foppish, floppy kind of boy who feigns kind of vulnerability in order to get in someone's bed. He's basically suffocating her. And he's and it's so chilling, and you're on such a close-up. If anyone has actually gone through any kind of sexual, date rape-esque, spiking kind of experience, I would say that this scene, 2/3 of the well, right towards the end, is deeply, deeply unsettling. Infinitely more unsettling than the rest of the film. And of course, spoiler, what the presence does is it goes downstairs and wakes up him rather than waking her up, which is kind of odd. I mean, it's unfortunate, it's annoying, because I thought otherwise it was a very economic, it was a very thought-provoking, it was a very short, highly efficient film, which cost $2 million to make. You know, and it was doing a serviceable job, but then it kind of, you get these sort of kinks in the narrative, and you're like, wake her up. You woke her up, you stopped that, and so is it any good? You know what? It's 85 minutes long. I think there's room in the marketplace for it, you know, really economic and effective films. I thought the camera work was sensational. I thought the build of the presence, the ghost's sort of personality was kind of intriguing. There was a constant sense of voyeurism. I mean, the sex scenes, it was clever popping in scenes that we shouldn't have seen. There are scenes also of vulnerability where the father is really sad, and that's great. That awkwardness of feeling like you're watching something and they don't know you're watching. As I say, it does a very effective job of building tension for, let's say, 80 minutes, which is when we get to the scene with Ryan being a kind of fucking serial killing psycho. It does a really good job of sort of building tension and drama, having removed the ultimate sort of shock, if you like, which is, oh my God, there's a ghost here. I mean, from the get-go, you know you're a ghost, essentially. And so this film is very clever in that it's not about the fact of them trying to find out what it is that's there. We know what's there. We're in the sort of privileged position of knowing we're a ghost and we're watching everything. So no. I was shocked and surprised to find the horror when the horror came in the boy, Ryan, and his behaviour and his treatment of Chloe. I was just really unsettled, and we're an extreme close-up between the two of them. Very well performed, I have to say, by West Mulholland as the boy, Ryan. Very, very sinister and aggressive, but calm and psychopathic and sociopathic and just eerie and weird. Lucy Liu, she was all right. I think she kind of died. I mean, she had to play quite a sort of one-dimensional, disconnected from the family woman. I felt there's an argument that was perhaps a bit too stereotypical, a woman who's kind of distracted by other things. I liked the sibling rivalry. It was very real between the girl and Callina Liang, who plays Chloe. What a sensational young actress. You think she's a shy and retiring type, and then you realise she's actually got she's got a hunger for sex and being flirty and suggestive, and she's got a bit of rebellion against her family, but she's also got a huge fondness and affection for her dad, and she's clearly traumatised by the death of Nadia, her friend, prior to the film. So all in all, I would say that this was a pleasant surprise. Given that it's so short, I'd say absolutely spend your shekels and go to the cinema and sit down and watch it. So what would I score it? I would give this 78 out of 100.